I mean, I wrote an article, an op-ed about a month ago. It got published in a local paper here because there was a town, one of the biggest towns in my area in upstate New York, and they banned, they just did an outright ban for battery storage, and they have a lot of industrial areas too. We're not just talking about resi. And some of the statements that the fire chief was making and the town supervisor was making were just patently wrong. It was 100% not factual. Like, we have to evac everyone in a 1.5 mile radius. That's not true. It's never been true. But there hasn't been I wrote an op-ed, but like, these are the things we need to get ahead of.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much.
The clean energy industry is moving fast. The deals are getting bigger, the technology is evolving, and the stakes have never been higher. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour, the podcast for solar, storage, and microgrid professionals who want to stay ahead of it all. Each week, your host, Tim Montague, industry advisor and president of Clean Power Consulting Group, brings you unfiltered conversations with the leaders actually building the energy transition. Now, here's your host, Tim Montague.
Today on the Clean Power Hour, site origination and battery development. You know, here in the United States, the grid is burgeoning with data centers, with electrification of transportation, with electrification of everything. And the grid is a wonderful machine, but it is somewhat antiquated, and our means and methods of transforming the grid are somewhat limited. So it's my pleasure to bring back Joe Tassone Jr. He is the founder and managing partner of onCORE Origination. He has originated thousands and thousands of solar and battery and other types of real estate projects. Welcome back to the show, Joe.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much. It's always an honor to know you and to be on your podcast. You have a great medium here, and it's always a pleasure. I'm one of the partners. We have 3 partners, but for my ego, you could call me managing partners. But we're all equal at onCORE. And
a partner in onCORE Origination. Thank you for correcting me.
One of the founders, yes. And we've been in business for about 9 years, and we operate in half of the states, about 25 states. And we do origination for solar, battery, and data centers, NEV. And we also do a little bit of, we still touch cell towers, which was my industry. And like I said in our pre-interview, today actually marks my 30th anniversary. 30 years ago in April, the Thursday before the Masters in 1996, I started doing work with a company doing site acquisition in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for Sprint Spectrum at the time, looking for land for cell towers. And since then, it's been a long road. Been in solar, renewable energy for about the last nine years, I believe. So it goes by fast. And I think every time I think I've seen it all, there's always a new issue that comes up, a new problem, a new challenge, but that's what makes our jobs and our lives interesting.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the anniversary. I laud you for sticking to it. And for anyone who doesn't know, Joe writes a lovely newsletter every Monday. And so if you just go to his LinkedIn, you can subscribe to that. It's also on Substack. But Joe, let's talk about battery development. I'd really like to shine a light on this. I think of batteries in terms of earn, save, protect. Okay, you can earn with grid services. You can save money by doing energy arbitrage, attacking demand charges or capacity charges, buying low and selling high. And then you can protect your asset, your building, your home, your community from grid outages. Okay, so you can have resilience if the battery is big enough and you have the right switch gear when the grid goes down. And so batteries are, they're like solar on steroids, really. Solar's cool, but it only works when the sun is shining, and the battery works 24/7. And here we are in 2026. There's an explosion of battery development happening. This is because it is good for grid operators and good for consumers. And so there's an onslaught of battery projects coming into the built environment. And this is at all scales, from a home battery, right? A Tesla Powerwall 3, 13 kilowatt hours, to grid scale batteries, which are hundreds or thousands of kilowatt hours. And humans sometimes don't like change, and bureaucracies sometimes don't like change. And so there's pushback of various flavors. But why don't we set the table a little bit, Joe? In your experience doing site development, what are the top 3 issues that developers need to be aware of when developing battery storage?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Tim. And just to take a step back from a historical perspective, I mean, we're origination land developers. We don't get too involved on the technical side, but we know enough about the technology and being in the trenches and dealing with property owners and stakeholders and municipalities. We kind of get a good flavor. When to your point, I guess I never like to use the word explosion when it comes to battery storage, but it is, for lack of a better word, it's been an exponential growth. And since we've been involved in it, when we started onCORE, we were just solely working and looking for land for mostly front of the meter projects in community solar markets for solar. And in late 2018, the company, one of our clients came to us, say Con Ed is in New York's coming out with a emerging battery storage program, mainly in New York City, because of the issues they were having there with grid congestion and load issues. People didn't even know what batteries were. I remember we started doing leasing in Brooklyn and the Bronx for 10,000 square foot lease areas in New York. There wasn't even the program yet. It wasn't cemented. And I remember going to I think it was called SBI, or one of the older shows in 2019, and people were almost laughing, like, battery. I mean, when we were going out in even 2019, 2020 in Con Ed, Staten Island, I mean, no property owners were getting proposals or letters. Now you go there's probably not I'm being serious when I say this, there's probably not a property owner in one of the 4, I mean, no one's doing it in Manhattan, but the 4 boroughs who has any type of industrial land that has not received multiple offerings. So it's becoming incredibly competitive in the market. So, and fast forward now, and we can go to a little bit more of the program. But to answer your question, the 3 biggest concerns that we see is, the first one is fire safety. There is a lot of misinformation out there, and someone could just, and the beauty about the internet is not only giving you the information you want, that's right, but you could also find anything you want to prove whatever narrative you want to have. And we've in a world of NIMBYism. So there's been a few fires, and unfortunately they happened in New York, which has a very good battery storage program on the state level. There's been a Southampton, there's been a couple fires, the same facility in Warwick, New York. So batteries have gotten a lot of bad press. So what that happens, what people do is they just have a They put up a barrier, and batteries now are not safe according to the narrative that's out there, and it caused a lot of consternation. I mean, I went through this in the late '90s when cell towers were becoming prevalent. Even though there was the Telecom Act and there was strong state court decisions, towns still denied cell towers, and a lot of them got built through litigation. And just because of that "not in my backyard" attitude, the difference that we're seeing here and I want to expand on this a little bit later, on the municipal level and the community level, is towns are usually, when something gets banned or zoned out, it's usually a reaction. It's an emotional reaction because a company comes in and proposes something. It causes a lot of grief, and the politicians of the town just decide to write a code to not have any more whatever cell towers or whatever other types of buildings have caused that making people upset. This, we're seeing towns now without even projects being proactive banning. I've seen codes that actually use the word, "we're banning batteries," which is, I'm not an attorney, but it's basically very challengeable in the court of law. And
Yeah.
batteries, what I always like to say, and again, this is number one, the fire risk. New York City, the FDNY of New York, any application in New York City for this type of use and a lot of other uses have to be approved by the fire department. And they are one of the most stringent reviewing bodies in the country, if not the world. To get a project, even when we're doing cell antennas on rooftops, it is a very complex, stringent project. And they are allowing batteries, and some have been built in between high-rise buildings in some of the boroughs. So there's always a risk. There's more house fires and gas station fires and car fires 20-fold than there's only been a handful of battery fires. So that's one of the biggest things, I would say, number one, that comes up, because lithium does the typical lithium ion batteries that are being used, they are difficult to put out, but they're very contained. And the few fires that there have been, there's been no injuries and no deaths to my understanding. And there's been
So
very little property
let's get the other two on the table though. There's fire, that's an important one. And certainly probably the first thing that comes to anyone's
yeah.
mind when they think of grid scale batteries. What are some other issues that developers need to be thinking of when they're looking for sites for battery development?
Then the second thing would be aesthetics, but it's such a far cry from what the first issue with the fire. I would say just aesthetically, if you're
Mhm.
putting them in an area that is close to residential, you're gonna get people getting nervous about the fire risk, even though I believe it is unfounded. And the second one is just what it looks like, but that's a far number two from what the fire issue brings
And then
up to
number
people.
three,
Number three, I got to think about this for a second. Is I off the top of my head, Tim, those are the top two that really come up, and there's a third one.
I
I
would
would just
say what else is going on in that jurisdiction, and are you dealing with a jurisdiction, whether that's a county or a town, where there have been other moratoria, for example? Um, you know, batteries are just now the tip of the iceberg. There's other forms of development happening. And what's really on my mind, Joe, about this is the fatigue that some communities can get because there's pipeline development in rural America. I'm talking gas and CO2 pipeline development, and there's transmission line development. So there's power lines coming through communities. There's solar farms coming to communities. There's wind farms, and now there's battery farms. And sometimes this layer cake can become a tipping point for communities. But if you're a developer, you absolutely want to be very careful about where you're focusing your energy, because some communities are more willing than others to work with the changing times, and some just put their foot down and say, no, we're not going to have wind or solar or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and certainly you have to understand when you're looking for sites is understanding the jurisdiction you're working within. And sometimes, and I've written articles about this too, where I've, again, this comes from years of experience. I've had proposed projects in towns where I thought the climate that it was going to be like my old boss would say, the final scene of Braveheart. Like you're ready, it's just going to be brutal, and you go in there and you get approved in one meeting. I've also had other situations where the town has a perfect code, they allow it, they're very apt to meet with you, and you walk in, and it's like, to use the other another movie reference. It's like the scene from Goodfellas when Tommy walks in and he gets whacked. You're like, what happened? I thought this was going to be a cakewalk. So never assume. And I see developers and companies, they get very skittish. They look at zoning being black and white, and it isn't black and white. Obviously, if you have a municipality like New York is a home rule state, it's municipal, it's village, city, town ruled. I think they have 900 and some odd jurisdictions in the state. And it's, of course, if you have a code that allows battery storage in certain districts and the setbacks are reasonable, that certainly makes the process easier. And if you do happen to get denied, you have a little bit easier path to litigate and get approval through the judicial process. Now, that doesn't mean there's towns where they just don't allow it, and you have the right project and it's the right time, and you talk with the town and they realize that, and you can get approved via use variance. That's not to say that you should just always go for a use variance, but I see too many developers just read a code and they just, we're not going to do it. There's not a path to permitting. And I wrote an article. What does that mean exactly? There's ways. There's public utility statutes in the states, and don't give up. That's my biggest thing, because there is too many towns now that are outrightly banning these. There's something like 85 towns right now in New York. I could be off by a few that are in moratorium for batteries. There's towns that I've developed batteries in. 3 towns in Westchester County, where this is going back in 2020, 2021. They went through zoning without a problem. They got approved within 6 months. There was no opposition. 2 of the 3 towns now have outright bans of battery storage. Now, I don't know if the impetus was a project that, a reaction to a project that wasn't as favorable, but my biggest takeaway of all this, people, I should say takeaway, is don't look at zoning as just a black and white process. It's a lot of diligence.
Personally, I think that developers need to become more savvy. We as a society also need to understand that there are costs to moratoria, for example, and we need to educate one another and our elected officials. Um, as we were saying in the pre-show, it's on one level, I respect AHJ's decision um, to create a ban, but there is a cost to consumers, meaning the grid infrastructure is not going to get upgraded in that jurisdiction as a result, and this does impact consumers' bottom line. Not to mention the grid operators, because if you're a grid operator and the grid is at capacity, you want lots of batteries because they're sponges and they can absorb excess energy if it's the middle of the day and the solar's cranking, and then they can release energy when energy is expensive or needed on demand, right? Instantaneously. This is why VPPs are such a great thing, virtual power plants, because they can replace peaker plants. Okay, historically, we have these like 10 megawatt peaker plants, natural gas fired power plants that are mostly dormant, but then get fired up when the grid is at capacity on a hot summer day, for example, and everyone's cranking the AC. Well, that's very expensive. That's a very expensive asset for the grid operator to own and operate that asset, largely because it's not operating very much. And so batteries are replacing this older technology, and I see it as part of the smart grid. Like, batteries are digital technology, and they're instantaneous, and they're multifaceted, and they're much smarter. So I see them as a whole as a very good thing. But back to my comment about developers, as developers, right, we have to be more savvy, have a better ground game, make sure that we're hosting educational sessions with consumers, with residents, with elected officials, so that they can understand. Because as you said, there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. People freak out when they see a battery fire and they go, well, one fire means they're all dangerous. And we have to remember that there are a lot of things in the built environment that can catch fire. And the track record of utility batteries is not bad in the greater scheme of things.
No, I agree with everything you said. Obviously, batteries are good. There wouldn't be a market if they weren't, and utilities are embracing them more and more. I mean, there are utilities. You mentioned the peaker plant. I mean, New York City up until several years ago, I believe had a few coal peaker plants in operation. And you're right, it's analog. The amount of money, time, and energy that it takes to operate a peaker, an analog peaker plant is absolutely ridiculous. And these are being replaced by large battery farms. There's on the DG level, it is putting out having even a 5 megawatt 20-hour battery, say in the New York City area, what that can do on a millisecond notice to put power into the grid or store power. It's really a no-brainer at the end of the day. Now, the issue, Tim, is that people, when you get back to the community level, I don't want to say people don't care about that. It's hard for them to get that around their head. Even when we were I go back to cell towers because there was a lot of parallels there. There's an obvious need, for cell towers, especially back in the day. You couldn't make calls. There was safety implications, but the vocal minority, you'd have 40 or 50 people that are affected by, say, the site of it because it's in their neighborhood, and they would go to the meetings and they would organize and really, speak loudly, write a lot of things on the internet, and the fathers of the town would get, they'd get nervous and they would get denied. I mean, I've had towns tell me years ago in closed sessions, hey, I know you're going to win you're probably going to win in a lawsuit, but we're going to deny you anyway. And that's that. Unfortunately, those people exist. They got to face their neighbors. It is unfortunate because it costs a lot of time and money for the developer. And now we're seeing the tide turn a little bit where people want that type of technology. And so, yeah, to your point about being more proactive and savvy, absolutely. I believe our industry, and I'm not trying to impugn any of these associations because everyone's wonderful industry, great people overall. The industry associations work very, very hard, but we have to do a better job as an organization, as an industry, getting ahead of this. I mean, I wrote an article, an op-ed about a month ago. It got published in a local paper here because there was a town, one of the biggest towns in my area in upstate New York, and they banned. They just did an outright ban for battery storage, and they have a lot of industrial areas too. We're not just talking about resi. And some of the statements that the fire chief was making and the town supervisor was making were just patently wrong. It was 100% not factual. Like, we have to evac everyone in a 1.5 mile radius. That's not true. It's never been true. But there hasn't been I wrote an op-ed, but like, these are the things we need to get ahead of. And we need to start meeting with the town associations and the county associations and getting them from a proactive level. And that's some of it's being done. And you can't fight every battle, right? So the more proaction we could take, the better it's going to be. We're not going to win every battle, but the reactiveness costs so much time and money at the end of the day.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855 584 7168 to find out more. So tell us about some success stories. You don't have to give names, but talk about the types of projects that you're working on and where you've seen a good combination of collaboration between developers and communities, or developers being very selective about technology, location, size, these kind of basic facts of doing any project development.
Yeah, there's a project, and this is actually, because remember, a lot of this is relatively new. So there's, believe it or not, even though we've been uh, doing this for several years, there's not a ton of case studies out there right now. I mean, we've gotten sites that were at least 5, 6 years ago; they're not even built yet. But a good example of this is more on the PV side, but it's one and the same. You know, batteries is a technology. There's people that are denying solar too, and it's a little less controversial now, depending on where you are. But listen, there's a solar project in that same town that I was talking about 10 minutes from me. There's a solar project proposed, and it's I don't even think anyone's going to see it, but this subdivision next to it, the neighbors are organized and they are vehemently against the project, and they have the voice of the town. They have the voice, and they are connected, and they're doing everything they can to stop that project. So we had a project in my former company. It's about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was in a city in upstate New York, in a commercial area. The city, a large city, the council was very upset because the project came in. It was on agricultural land, and it caused a lot of problems, a lot of grief. The company that did it was not. I don't think they handled it very well. So what does the city do? They react and they put in a moratorium. It's supposed to be a 3-month moratorium. At the same time, we were working with a piece of property. It was commercial. It was actually a quasi city entity, a regional development agency, through the moratorium. And again, this is a town now, a city that had a moratorium, and we still went in anyway with our we didn't put an application in, but through the process they extended another 3 to 6 months, 9 months. They came out with a very stringent code. It was one of the worst solar codes I've ever seen. It basically killed our project, but we were able to work with the planning department, with the city council, say, hey, we pushed back. We redlined the code. This is all public, went back and forth. At the end of the day, they came out with a reasonable code. They appreciated our input. We got our project approved, and it's well on its way. So that was it was an uphill battle, but we were able to. It was the right site too, Tim. You know, let's be honest. It was in a commercial zone. It was sort of shielded from residential. So that's the other thing too. I mean, if you have the right site, your fight is going to be a little bit easier, or no fight at all. But you know, we got to go where the grid is, right? So you're not always going to have a perfect project in
Exactly.
a commercial zone.
Yeah, you can't always be super selective about where you want to site a project because you are at the mercy of where there's grid
Hmm.
capacity and access. But Joe, you're referring a lot to New York State, which I would argue is probably one of the most difficult jurisdictions in the country to be a developer in, whether it's wind, solar, or batteries. But do you have some experience from other jurisdictions, other states? Like here in Illinois, we are getting a combination of grid scale batteries and a fair number of behind the meter CNI batteries now, as well as residential batteries. And this is just the beginning. We have new VPP legislation that is going to really open the floodgates for front of the meter storage. But what's going on in other parts of the country and what are some success stories? I'm very keen to bring good news. As much as there is challenges, there are challenges for the industry. I want to try to identify what's working and what can my listeners learn from in their jurisdictions. And my listeners are all over the country.
Yeah, no, that's a good that's a good segue, Tim. I mean, we work in a lot of states. We do a lot of work in MISO, Illinois. we're doing battery storage right now, leasing, but it's very early stage. So we're not to the point of, to my knowledge, I don't even know if there's actually been a zoning application submitted. I mean, the program, we really started getting amped up about 9 months ago. But in, doing some of the bulk, the utility scale, and we're seeing some states now, and maybe this is more on the solar side, taking jurisdiction on the state level. I know Illinois has some state, it has legislation or a code that actually where it gives some relief from certain setbacks. The state of Maryland has, if you're over 2 megawatts, I believe. And I'm not an expert in every state or pretend to be, but you can go to a state level process, which is a little bit, it takes it out of the NIMBYism. And we've done some projects in Mass and some industrial areas that the towns were receptive, to the battery storage project. One was out in Eversource. It was actually battery in combination of storage, and it went through in a couple of meetings, and there was no, and it wasn't an industrial zone either. But yeah, you are seeing, some towns open to this, and we're also in Connecticut, for instance. Connecticut has a Connecticut Siting Council where batteries are regulated. It's an onerous process, but again, they have jurisdiction over it, and it takes it out of the local municipalities' jurisdiction. I'm not always saying that's a good thing per se, but sometimes it just gives more of an objective view of things. So it's not all negative. I mean, this is development's always tough, and even in New York, but there's tons and tons of success stories. Like I said, we got the 3 projects built in Westchester. There's many sites now that are moving forward. So yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want to only accentuate the bad cases, but right now there are some areas that need a lot more focus, just because of, there's not many states that have a sort of a DG level program. I think there's only about 5 right now.
In Illinois, in 2023, we got preemptive legislation that prevents counties from creating more restrictive rules around siting wind and solar than the state level. So we have a state rule about setbacks and this kind of thing. It's very easy to tweak numbers in municipal codes, like setback requirements from fence lines or property lines or buildings, and quickly negate the possibility of developing a project in that area altogether. This happened in my own county with wind. Our wind ordinance was too restrictive, requiring too long a setback from the wind farm to local homes. And lo and behold, we have virtually no wind turbines in Champaign County. We're surrounded by counties all full of wind farms, but very few in the county of Champaign. And, I haven't been in the weeds on permitting battery projects, but when it comes to solar, the misinformation that I've seen is often in the realm of ridiculous, like people arguing that the solar farm is going to make too much noise. And yes, inverters do make noise, but if you've ever stood next to an inverter in even a rural area, there's all kinds of ambient noise. There's dogs barking, there's sirens, there's wind, and the inverter, which only runs during the day, mind you, so it's not at all going to interrupt people's sleep, because the sun isn't shining at night. So anyway, I'm sure the ridiculousness, so to speak, is even worse when it comes to battery storage. And it does bring up that I have some colleagues that were working with the Illinois Fire Institute, which is a training and safety institute for fire departments around the country, and they were creating a program to train firefighters about grid scale batteries, because you can imagine there are thousands and thousands of jurisdictions, right, that are running fire departments, and they're all reinventing the wheel around battery safety. And it's like, no, we need to level the field and have a general understanding of what works, what is safe and what's not.
Yeah, we get a lot of, well, we see it where fire departments push back on this, and some of it is just fear, a lack of knowledge, lack of equipment. But developers will certainly train fire departments and even provide any equipment that they may think they need within reason. And my understanding, it's not like it's $1 million. And so that is, it comes back to the education. I believe, unlike other types of buildings or projects, it always where the fire usually a fire department will opine on the turnaround radius, even on a solar project. Make sure we get our trucks in there, turn around. Outside of that, they don't really make any ways for you. But with batteries, they seem to have a little more. It just goes back to, because unlike other things that burn, lithium ion, just it takes a while to extinguish, and that seems to generate the nexus of fear. Even though, when was a really good article earlier this year by, actually, I think it was a very prominent fire chief, and the Warwick, New York's a famous battery, because I think it got on fire 3 times, 2 or 3 times. I think they condemned it ultimately. And it basically, the point of the article was this did exactly what it's supposed to do. Everything was contained. No one got hurt. Caused no outside damage. There was no, one thing you'll hear about, the noxious gases, but any expert will say that it's no different than a house fire. And one of the articles I wrote last year, and this was, I was driving on a main road by me, and it was closed off for a whole day. There was a gas station fire. Gas station fires, if you look it up, I want to say there's hundreds of them a year. The road, there was white foam all over the road. It destroyed the gas station. It destroyed 4 or 5 vehicles. I don't believe anyone got injured, but there are injuries and deaths every year. But it's the gas station fires. Gas stations are located sometimes right next to residential neighborhoods in a commercial area. You might see a subdivision behind you. They're on 4 corners a lot of ways. There's cars. There's people. There's 16-year-old person that just got his license versus a person that shouldn't even be driving, operating flammable liquids, right? We take this for granted, and there's fires all the time.
Yeah.
Lithium-ion batteries are very rare. What?
In our last few minutes together, Joe, let's talk about what your experience is with successful developers. You've obviously worked with a whole bunch of different developers. Your niche is origination, right? You are identifying parcels that meet certain criteria and getting into dialogue with those owners and helping to get site control for developers who are then taking the projects further down the road. But what does it take, Joe, to be a successful developer in your experience?
Yeah. This is what I'm passionate about. What we're passionate about. That's why we started the company. Is development, getting site control, to me, is the most important thing you can do. We've seemed to focus in this industry so much on finance and technology, even policy, which is critical. I say that's the oxygen of the business. But if you don't have land, if you can't get the owner to sign on the line that's dotted, you don't really have anything. It doesn't matter. And we lose tens of millions of dollars. I see customers losing millions of dollars a year because of lack of execution. So there's a lot of things. What I would say to the tenets of being a good developer, the first thing I would say is just having a clear understanding of where to go. One of our mantras, and not to sell onCORE, but it's not only what we give you, it's what we don't give you. We show our clients, because you could waste a lot of time and energy looking in areas where they're not leasable, there's title issues, there's floodplain issues, bad circuitry. That's a little bit of a gray area sometimes. But number one is knowing where to go and having that acumen of really zeroing in on the right parcel. Some of that comes with experience. Again, it's not always just black and white. Sometimes it is. And number two is to have a clear vision and goal. If these companies, the IPPs right now, there's always focus on M&A and buying late stage projects, but we're seeing a much more of an emergence, even with all the headwinds we've had the last year or so, of doing real true origination and ground up development. Especially now that the ITC might be going away for solar at some point, or it is going away. So it's having that's clear. Like, you got to build pipeline. I hear companies now, we're just focusing on, safe harbor and this. Of course, that's important. But if we learned one thing being in this business, and again, I'm 9 years, some people have been at 18 years, is development never stops. If you cannot play this game, and this goes your tenant number 2, you cannot come in and go out and step in with test the waters. You have to be all in as a developer. You can't go into a market and say, well, what if the ITC pauses, it goes away, and this state incentive does that? And that's not to say not being judicious and being vigilant and maybe pulling back some capital, but you have to be committed to a market. You have to be committed to an end goal, because what I've seen is the most successful developers are the most relentless. They're the ones that persevered. They're the companies that don't stop developing, and they appreciate pipeline. I hear a company, oh, we have too much pipeline. That is the dumbest thing somebody could say, because I've been there. Pipeline goes like that, right? The money you think it's going to take you to develop, triple it. So just be aggressive. You got to be just persistent and have a vision of where you want to go and stick to it. And all the rest of the stuff is really just blocking and tackling.
We're going to end the show there, Joe. I really appreciate your time. And again, congratulations on 30 years in site development. That's really cool. Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial, but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please tell a friend about the show. That's the best thing you can do to help others find the show. And please give us a review on Apple or Spotify. Joe, how can our listeners find you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. It's under Joseph Tassone Jr. Our website is www.oncoreorig.com. That's oncoreorig.com. And we have a good website, a lot of good stuff on there. We're also on LinkedIn. But yeah, thank you very much, Tim. I really appreciate it. I love talking about this stuff, batteries, solar, everything, data centers. It's really where the future's at, and it is an incredible business we're in. If you see the three things that I'll end with this that I see that really gets me excited is one, it's unfortunate on a personal level, so our electricity prices are going up all the time. Number two, the amount of demand right now, and there's not enough capacity with all this new AI and all this technology coming in, and you see a continued amount of investment. I've been in industries where you wouldn't see a dollar contributed into an industry from a JP Morgan or a big institutional investor. So it's there. We just have to execute and stay positive.
With that, I'll say, let's grow solar and storage. I'm Tim Montague. Thank you so much, Joe Tassone Jr.
Thanks, Tim.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more.